Look, the video you just saw is hard to watch for many reasons. One, the video was filmed from an FSU student, and I'm not sure why she was filming. I'm not going to question that. She's a victim. She's in a difficult situation. Not going to question that. What she captures is more importantly the story and the point of our conversation, which is this acronym and emergency procedure, run, hide, fight, that most institutions have adopted. When you do it right, you include run, hide, fight into context and conversation, into training protocols, rehearsals, practice, integration of law enforcement and their responses, because the two go hand in hand. You can't have an acronym for a person who has no clue what's happening, who's just following a prescription, a protocol for survival, and not include what to expect on the other side of this as your emergency responders respond. Characteristically in the video, there are a couple of things that stand out to me. She's recording, that stands out. In the recording, you hear people that are scared. I understand that. I understand how fear works. I understand that many of the students that were hiding thought for sure they were going to die. Fear and impending doom. In the video, you also hear students communicating to loved ones, whether it's on their cell phone or on text, they're engaged in that. And fourth, very distinctly, you hear the intercom communicating, whether it's an emergency notification, an automated message for that emergency notification. It's giving instructions one way over the intercom. Now, if you were to take a guess at how big Florida State University is, having never been there, what would you think? How many buildings? How many acres or square miles? Well, your guess would probably be light. 403 buildings on the main campus, spread across 485.7 acres. It's the reason why FSU has their own police department. This is known as a crisis. And specifically in that crisis, there would be a crisis site, or whereby the shooter is active. Because on one hand, when you say run, what are you implying to a civilian who has no training? Well, you're trying to keep it simple, stupid. It's the reason in the military and the infantry, we have battle drills. We call them immediate action drills. FM 7-8 battle drills, infantry battle drills. I would expect my fire team would immediately know what to do in a react to contact drill, because it's ingrained in them in infantry basic training and advanced individual training at Fort Benning, Georgia. Typically, when reacting to contact, as they're being fired upon, move to cover and concealment while trying to identify where the threat is at, while bounding, while they're trying to engage or suppress the enemy. That would happen in a couple seconds, and it would happen as an immediate action with no contemplation. In additional cognitive cases, identify where that threat's at and announce it. 2 enemy personnel, 12 o'clock, 200 meters, something like that. Now, why is that important for a civilian? Because, well, civilians aren't trained. The entirety, philosophically, of an emergency procedure is to reduce the amount of time it takes to think through a protocol and instead act. So that's what we're doing. In your head, imagine you're a civilian, you know nothing about what's going on, and you say, what do I do? Remember, run, hide, fight. Okay, I run. Where are you running? Well, if there's 403 buildings and you're in one of the buildings, spread across 485.7 acres, and you get an emergency notification on your phone, which is the notification of contact, that is your react to contact drill. You're sitting in a classroom, you look at your phone and it says active shooter on campus, and you default to your acronym, except you might be in a building that's 400 acres away from where the shooter is at. When you're in this building, again, this is institutional protocol, and you're running, the next part of the acronym is hide. That implies, well, no. I run and then I hide. I'm running to hide. And I have taught active shooting protocols with law enforcement where the people that were part of the institution thought that was what they were doing. That is a massive error. Now, there's two sides to this story that I'll give you. On the law enforcement side, one of the reasons why it's important as a protocol for people who are in harm's way to bed down, to barricade in place, is because first responders are trying to manage where the bad guy is. In the right protocol, from the right guys, not Uvalde, but the right guys, they're going to go to the sound of gunfire. And the more people you have running around in chaos, the more issues that you're going to create for the first responders, especially in those precious moments. There has to be a balance. But here's what I'll tell you in my unsolicited advice. You have a very short period of time and duration based on the crisis kicking off, the emergency notification, and the announcement to get away as quickly as possible. You sitting underneath a desk, hiding in a classroom, is your false sense of security that the door can't be breached. In Virginia Tech, it was breached. There is no scenario where in an immediate action, there is a period of time where it's appropriate, but in the immediate action, there is no time where it's appropriate to be on your cell phone. You moving your physical body off the crisis site is more important than anything else. We learned this lesson in the case studies that came out of the Las Vegas shooting at the Mandalay Bay. People who stopped and bedded down became victims. You might have a shooter that's in an elevated position. You might have a shooter who lays down a base of fire, who uses grazing fire techniques and tactics to create as many casualties as possible. So bedding down and seeking cover or stopping and hiding is not going to be the best protocol. I beat that dead horse. So what is the protocol? By all means necessary, run. But don't run to hide. Run to run until you're out of harm's way. Run as far and as fast as you can. If there's obstacles in your way, go around the obstacle or go through the obstacle. If you're in a classroom that's being forced to be barricaded and there's an opportunity, throw a desk out of the window and move out of that window in those precious moments where immediate action is necessary. Now, I'm not talking about you waited 10 minutes, first responders, special response, and special weapons and tactics teams are migrating through the school. I'm not talking about that part of the scenario. There might be a time and place where it's best to bed down and allow them to deal with the threat. But even then, in very specific instances, there are opportunities to bug out, escape, and save your own life. You have to be the person that switched on, not following the pack and using your best judgment. You could be in a classroom. You could be bedded down and you could look around. You could gain some situational awareness on the circumstance and see an opportunity to escape into a parking lot, potentially into your vehicle. Take that potential opportunity. Also understand that law enforcement has a job to do. If you're a person coming out of that building, your hands need to be up and you need to be moving like you're not a threat. All right, what we know about this case so far is this guy's 20 years old. He showed up with the intent of obviously doing harm. We have 2 people that are killed. Prayers go out to the victims and their families. It's tragic that this happened, but we know there's 2 victims and about 5 people who are injured, including some that are in critical condition. Apparently, his mother is a deputy sheriff. He was even involved in youth law enforcement officer programs, and he ended up using his mother's ex-service weapon. Over the course of this woman's career in 18 years, she's going to life cycle her service or duty weapon, and there was probably an opportunity to buy it back. She bought it back, and it was her personal weapon that he ended up using. Already, the left-wing media has already politicized this event. In fact, on CNN last night, I saw somebody being interviewed blaming the Trump administration for the shooting that took place at FSU. All right, moving on, we have this situation where these 2 kids, these 2 17-year-old kids in Texas, get into a confrontation One of the students allegedly pushes one of the students and winds up stabbing in the chest, and the kid dies. He not only dies, he dies in the arms of his twin brother, and this takes place in the morning at a school event. Now, why has this case already become a national headline? Well, it's easy. It's a race issue, because that's what the media is already reporting. Already, the media and the interwebs are already putting out that this kid, because he wears camouflage and is white, is tied to somehow white supremacy. I mean, check out this clip from Megyn Kelly.
But unfortunately, the internet has done its thing, and they have tried to paint the victim here, Austin Metcalf, as a white supremacist, for which there is zero support. It's ridiculous. Right. They're circulating pictures of Austin and his twin brother wearing camouflage and holding guns, like going out hunting, juxtaposed with Anthony in a suit, and this very popular guy on X calls him a suspected white supremacist. A suspected white supremacist? No, I mean, honestly, you could get sued for this, sir.
All right, so Carmelo Anthony's legal defense team is already saying this is a racial issue and that his client is a victim of the system. Carmelo Anthony says it was a clear-cut case of self-defense. Now, this is what's scary about this entire case. As people are talking about this online, one of the major issues is it shows the continued divide racially amongst Americans, where $400,000+ were raised for this kid's defense fund. It's going to be a self-defense case. So they're going to have a trial. They're going to have a jury. And the major concern is they're going to reestablish and change the precedent for self-defense. Let me give you a little analysis from a legal expert on self-defense, specifically in Texas. Let's roll the tape.
Now, what's really it's going to come down to, and I disagree with the guy who said this is not a self-defense case yesterday. I think he said it. This is definitely a self-defense case because it always is one until you look at the facts of the case and compare the two. You have to compare who was the initial aggressor. Was it an aggressive act for him to go up and say, get away from the tent? Did he do more than that? My understanding was maybe he touched him and put hands on him. Granted, that makes the decedent in this case maybe the initial aggressor. But you really still then have to look at whether or not Carmelo Anthony responded with appropriate force, he used a deadly weapon, and whether or not he was in imminent fear of great bodily injury. That's the standard in Texas and most every state to determine whether or not his actions, the way he perceived him, the way Carmelo Anthony perceived him when he took out that knife and stabbed him.
All right, so the question is it proportionate? If a kid pushes you, do you have the right to stab them in the heart and kill them? Of course not. I think every self-defense expert or just some common sense would tell you that's not how this works. But here's the problem. It's a jury of his peers. He's going to be tried as an adult. They're going to have a jury pool that potentially is going to weigh in and say, just like the expert said, I don't care. If this kid felt like his life was in danger, this is Texas. He has the right to self-defense, and this kid might get off. In fact, based on the volatility this case has already created, I'm going to make the prediction that this kid's going to get off. Why would I say that? Well, we already have a precedent. There's a case that took place at a protest where a military member driving part-time in Uber was confronted with a protester who was at a BLM protest, who happened to be white. His girlfriend was black. He had an AK-47. He approached the person with an AK-47 that happened to be thinking they were defending his life. He shoots the guy with the AK-47 and he goes to prison for murder. Yeah, well, then you would say that that's the opposite here. It's not the opposite. It's the same cultural bias and the volatility that we are dealing with in this entire nation. The rules and the law are not black and white. And I'm being a little facetious there because this is going to play out very differently than we think. Lastly, let's get into this weird situation that happens in Belize. Let's roll the tape.
Police say an American citizen hijacked a small plane at knife point. Here's ABC's Matt Rivers.
Tonight, the dramatic scene on a runway in Belize. Passengers running away from a small plane as authorities with guns race toward it. On board, an alleged hijacker who was a U.S. citizen shot dead by a passenger with a gun.
New at 3 p.m., an absolutely wild story out of Belize. An American military veteran was shot and killed after authorities say he hijacked a small passenger plane. 14 passengers and 2 crew members were on board that flight. Police say the suspect, identified as Atkinyella Taylor, stabbed 3 people, including a pilot. A passenger who was licensed to carry a firearm then shot Taylor. With all that going on, the plane did land safely. The motive for the hijacking is under investigation.
There's a couple things that are very weird about this. The first thing that's weird is they immediately release the information and say this guy's a veteran. Typically, they don't put out veteran status or that type of information unless it's relevant to the circumstance. And it seems irrelevant to the circumstance because he was just a tourist on a tourist visa visiting Belize and winds up taking hostages in a commercial flight, albeit a small commercial flight. He's taken hostages. He also ends up stabbing 3 people, which is reported, but one of the people on the plane has a gun? That part I don't understand. And so the totality of the circumstance is very bizarre to me because I'm like, why are there passengers on Belize flights that are allowed to carry firearms? Was he police? Was he an American federal employee? Like, why was he carrying a firearm? Like, I don't understand what was going on, why they would label him as a veteran, as the initial reports lined out. And I'm glad there was somebody armed on the plane, but that is not typical. Like, most countries in the world on commercial flights are not allowing people to be armed. Now, there are programs where pilots are allowed to carry with specific training and protocols. And there's obviously a U.S. Air Marshal program, but I just find it weird that a person on this 14-passenger plane just happened to be carrying, and they announced this person was a U.S. military veteran that winded up stabbing people trying to get out of the country. His ultimate goal was to get out of the country and to get away from this. Guys, I'm doing an underground episode of this on Patreon, talking about things mostly that I can't talk about on this channel. Appreciate all the support. Appreciate all the feedback. Peace out, guys.